Hello, good afternoon, or perhaps good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Imagining America Teaching and Learning Circle. My name is Trina Van Skyndel. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the membership director for Imagining America. And for those of you who may not be potentially familiar with Imagining America, what we are is a consortium of over 70 different colleges and universities that bring together scholars, artists, designers, humanists, and organizers. We work across institutional and disciplinary and community divides, and we seek to promote and strengthen public scholarship, cultural organizing, and campus change with the goal of inspiring collective imagination and knowledge making and civic action on important public issues to shift culture and to create change. We are based at UC Davis, which is our host campus. So our work is both regional and national. And some of the different types of program we offer includes our student fellowships, action research projects, an annual national gathering and other events, our journal called Public, and of course, why you are here today, our teaching and learning circles. So the goal of these online teaching and learning circles is to foster a learning community that builds conversations around opportunities, joys, challenges of designing and delivering community and creatively engaged courses and projects. So these have continued to evolve over time in terms of their topics, facilitation, attendee numbers. You'll see today we've purposely tried to keep this TLC, this teaching and learning circle, smaller with the intent to engage participants in some dialogue around the topic and also encourage some peer-to-peer support. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. As you probably saw when you logged in, the webinar is being recorded, so a link to the recording will be shared out in the coming weeks and posted on the IA Imagining America website. We hope, though, that you may choose to turn your video on to engage with our lovely presenters today. You know, it's really nice sometimes as a presenter to be able to at least see people's faces, but we also understand if you need a break from Zoom. We do also ask, though, that you keep yourself muted, at least during the initial presentation, but know we'll have time for engaging with each other and the presenters later on today. So one last thing I did want to mention, though, is during the presentation, we do invite you to use the chat to talk to each other, to maybe post resources or maybe questions you might have, and just generally to maybe engage with presenters. So speaking of the chat, as folks are kind of coming in, I want to encourage you to use the chat to introduce yourselves and where you're coming from today. And while you're doing that, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement developed in consultation with members of the Patwin Native community on whose land UC Davis is now based. So we should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of the Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Cachel-Dihi Band of Wintoon Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzal-Dihi Wintoon Nation, and Yosha-Dihi Wintoon Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. And I'm honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. So as folks continue to introduce themselves, where you're coming from today, we also wanted to provide a little bit of background and introduce our speakers, who I personally am very excited to hear from regarding their work and their partnership. I previously worked in environmental education and national and state parks and nature centers, and I'm very interested in place-based education myself and how the cultural and natural history of an area connects to the work that we do now in that place. So just very briefly, I'd like to introduce Robin Hill, who is an artist, a visualizer, a facilitator, a gleaner, an agitator, a conduit, a rearranger, a host, a fermenter and forager, optimist, collaborator and educator, seed bag carrier and transmitter. Hill focuses on the intersection between drawing, photography, and sculpture, and she is also a faculty member at UC Davis. And joining Robin today is Kathy Kohler, who has been with the UC Natural Reserve System since 2002, first as a co-director and currently as director of the McLaughlin National Reserve. Prior to this, she taught and conducted research in field stations across Western North America and internationally. So I'd like to just give a grateful welcome to both of them today and to now turn the presentation over to them.
Okay, thank you so much, Trina. And a big thanks to Erin and Papiro, and hello and thank you to Erica for making this all happen and run hopefully smoothly. I just want to give a few introductory remarks before I launch into my keynote presentation and give you an idea of the flow of my presentation and when Kathy will be joining in on the conversation, and you too. I'm really looking forward to speaking with all of you. So I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes. And then Kathy and I will talk for an additional 10 or 15 minutes about engagement at the reserve. And then we'll have 20 minutes for us to have a discussion. And I'm really looking forward to that part of it. Something that I would like you to sort of be thinking about going into the listening portion, the listening and watching portion, is that I'm thinking really hard about the way our interactions virtually have felt so open-ended and fluid and spontaneous and deliberate. And there's a kind of democracy that I think has made more shy people or reluctant people really show up, because everybody has the same rectangle space to occupy. And there's no hiding behind anything except your name if you don't have your video on. So sheltering in place has been a huge time of growth and learning for me personally, in that I have given myself permission to retreat, which is uncharacteristic. And I've been reflecting really deeply on my role as a citizen, as an artist, and I've been seeking out and trying to face, sometimes not successfully, but trying sincerely to face my blind spots. So I'm really interested in how these sort of interactions that we've all been having over Zoom and now migrating into real life, there's a big transition where we can actually think about how our experiences during COVID have changed us. How's it changed our teaching, our studio practices, our sense of connection to new ideas, people, places, and even research methods. And I really want to have you think about, when you're looking at my work and my collaborative work, is what's being learned? What are you learning when you listen? Where do you take it for your own use and experience? And what would you pull forward from your experiences of the past year, now that we're returning to in real life interactions, to foster a more equitable, experiential, less hierarchical space for your and our future interactions? So I'm really thrilled to be talking to people who are all across the country. This is a very unique aspect of the way we've been interacting, and it's really good. So without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm relying on my talented tech to tell me if things are blurry or, oh shoot, that's not what I wanted you to see, but we'll get to it. If anything is blurry or there's any problems at all. So, welcome to Sites of Exchange and Collaboration in Art Practice and Education. So my talk is going to be chunked up into 4 sections. Let's hold off on that for 1 second. I'm going to talk to you about my studio practice, my collaborative studio practice, my place-based work with students, and the importance of the UC Reserve System to my creative work and teaching. So this is something that kind of is an undercurrent of all of my creative work, which is that conception cannot precede execution. There is nothing but a vague fever. Hold on, let me hide the floating meeting controls. Oops. There's nothing but a vague fever before the act of artistic expression, and only the work itself, completed and understood, is proof that there was something rather than nothing to be said. It is not enough for a painter like Cezanne, an artist, or a philosopher to create and express an idea. They must also awaken the experiences which will make their idea take root in the consciousness of others. A successful work has the power to teach its own lesson. So we'll come back to that if you want to, and there will be notes. And I'd love for you to think about how artists think, which is it's the doing and the jumping in with 2 feet that is the starting point. Sometimes there is no question other than I wonder what's possible. So this is where my studio is. I thought it was important to kind of locate this talk in a real place and not the place of Zoom. I'm in an industrial strip mall in Woodland, California, which is a tiny little farm town, and you'll probably hear a train go by soon. And when you enter my studio, it's designed to be a kind of factory, kind of commercial place of business with a kind of front store area and then a factory in the back. And I have had no problem filling every square inch of it, not only with my inventory of the last 40 years of my art practice, but also new work that just keeps accumulating. And this is where I am right now, sitting in that green chair, talking to you guys. And there's my talk with my quote open, so you can picture that. So the other concept that runs throughout my work is the idea of chance and serendipity, and finding and having an encounter with something that already exists in the world. And in that sense, even my practice as a solo artist involves collaboration, not necessarily with people, but with things. So what a lucky find reveals first is neither cosmos nor chaos, but the mind of the finder. It might even be better to drop cosmos and chaos and simply say that a chance event is a little bit of the world as it is, a world always larger and more complicated than our cosmologies, and that smart luck is a kind of responsive intelligence invoked by whatever happens. So for me, finding something that invokes an inspiration or a sense of wonder is where I start. And I usually don't know what I'm doing until, there's been enough of a sort of a critical mass that's happened. And I define rules for myself: how many, where, how. So these are sea bricks that have washed ashore in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, that I've collected over a period of 30 years. These are concretions that I have collected also over a period of 30 years. These were the subject of a solo show in New York. And I'm really interested in the idea of art making itself, and that it's the artist's intention and the naming and the presentation that translates it from just a random occurrence in the world to something very deliberate and intentional, sort of like Chinese scholars' rocks. This is a monumental cyanotype, which is one of the many mediums I work in, of a collapsed house in the forest in Cape Breton. This is a burned chair that I extracted from my child's classroom when it burned down. And, it's a big leap to say, how can that be my work? And I'm not going to go into that now, but I'm happy to discuss that. I think about that a lot. And a lot of times I'm really intentionally questioning the idea of authorship. So some of my work exists in the two-dimensional realm, in a kind of fabricated drawing is what I call it, mode, where I'm working with scraps and situation textures that are around me. This is a rubbing of a floor grate of a friend's house. I'm going to go through these rather quickly because this really isn't a talk about my work necessarily, but the sensibility that underlies my collaborative work. So translation of sort of quotidian, everyday materials into something sort of more elegant and organized. This is drier lint. I'm sure you can kind of see what some of these things are. I'm really interested. These pieces were presented as large-scale photographs, so there's no real way to know the scale unless you're familiar with the object. So a project that still has a lot of life in it that I'm finding multiple iterations and opportunities for is a project that started with collages that I made on small pieces of what are called weighing papers, scientific weighing papers, sort of like glassine or wax paper. And I spent the year Trump was elected making these collages. I'm going to show you a few of them in this video, and I hope it's not going to be blurry for you. There are 450 total, and I'll show you how they translated into artwork. And there's no sound, so don't worry about that. So I'm interested in how a narrative, an unintentional narrative unfolds when these phrases, which I cut because they stood out to me and they had some ambiguity. They weren't specifically attached to a story. And really, I think what I was looking for was hope and prompts for how to be in the world and be productive and be positive in such a frightening time. I'll show you a few more. Okay, let's stop there. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna go back.
Where did your phrases come from, Robin?
They can't. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a really good question. They came from the New York Times. Why can't I see my presentation now? There it is. I get a daily delivery of the New York Times. Why can't I find? Hold on, guys. I can't find my. There it is. Sorry. So this is how I first displayed them when there weren't even 450, and they were just pinned to this big piece of canvas that was gessoed, and I called it a painting, and I showed it in a gallery, and it was viewed as a painting. And then I was invited to do a show in LA that's a virtual gallery that gave up its brick and mortar space. And I thought, I don't want to just do something online. What can I do that sort of builds on this project that is so important to me? And I decided to deputize a group of co-curators and gave each of them a stack of the phrases which I had made into stickers. And they placed them over the period of 2 months throughout LA. And today people are still sending me pictures of these stickers. They're actually very high quality and don't peel off in extreme weather. So to me, it was important to have an online exhibition that sort of resonated as a souvenir of an action or a record of an action. And what I wasn't thinking about, which I did learn later, was that the artists / co-curators felt really not burdened by, but a real sense of importance that they place these stickers in the right place. And it's like, oh my God, if it was me, I would have just taken all 25 and put them in one spot and been done with it. And no, they were so careful. There are still people who are still carrying them around waiting for the perfect spot. This was just sent to me last week from someone in LA. It's in the Bendix building. This is, I had to show this one because this artist, Stephanie Stein, has a project called Same Wall, Different Day. And every day it gets graffitied, and every day the landlord paints over the graffiti, and every day it gets graffitied. It's just this nonstop cycle of repair and I don't know, I'm not gonna, and disrepair. And so she decided to put the stickers there and they got graffitied over. I just love that so much. So then I thought, okay, so far I've made a really important work that's basically invisible to my community, my local community. It's out there, it's in my head. And one phrase was really sticking out to me: there's only one sky. And I decided that I would print all the phrases on a large scale and fill a gallery space that invited me to have a show with all 450 stickers, all 450 phrases, I mean. And what was really interesting is that the narrative, whereas in the little video I showed you, is very book-like, and maybe it will be a book with turning pages, but this installation really involved a kind of personal choreography. Like the walking and the looking up and down was what sort of created the narrative. And most people's experience of this project was extremely personal. And it's because, and emotional, because the phrases will land in the viewer in a way that resonates with something they already know or need to know. And so it was just really, really interesting to watch people having an experience of sort of reading an exhibition. So I'm going to move on to collaborative work now, and I think I'm doing good on time. I'm just looking, yeah, I'm good. So collaboration, really, really important to my creative practice. And I love this quote from this wonderful book, Free Play, Improvisation in Life and Art. You meet someone new and you create a language together. There is a commerce of feeling and information back and forth, exquisitely coordinated. When conversation works, it is not a matter of meeting halfway. It is a matter of developing something new to both of us. We need to remind ourselves of what is obviously true, but not often enough said, that different personality styles have different creative styles. There is no one idea of creativity that can describe it all. Therefore, in collaborating with others, we round up, as in any relationship, an enlarged self, a more versatile creativity. So one of my first collaborative projects was at UC Davis with mathematics professor Janko Gravner, who was studying crystal probability in crystal snowflake growth. And I saw a little thumbnail in a university publication and I freaked out because I work in cyanotype. I'm really interested in geometry. I'm interested in the micro and the macro and sort of, you know, visualizing things that are invisible. And I called him like on the spot. I called his office number and he answered. And I said, "Can we have coffee?" He's like, "Sure." And so we had coffee. And I was just like, I didn't want anything except, who are you? What are you studying? How can it be that your data visualization feels like my art? It's crazy. And so we applied for and won the first interdisciplinary collaborative research grant at UC Davis. And it was a lot of money. And I was able to buy a really big printer and tons of supplies. So you probably have no idea how big these are, but now you're going to. They're huge. They're like 9 feet square, and there are 25 of them. And they're all nicely rolled up in a tube in my studio, awaiting an opportunity to show them all together. That collaboration was so incredibly satisfying. And it led to us working with a geology professor who was managing what was then the Keck Cave. I don't think it's operational anymore, but it's a 3D virtual reality cave. And we were able to take the data and make it 3-dimensional and project it into the cave and walk inside the snowflakes. And it was just amazing. I can talk a lot. I could talk just about that project. I'm going to show you some more collaborative projects. Ula Warshall is actually in attendance today, so you'll have an opportunity to ask her questions about this project if you're interested. We enacted long before COVID a cross-country dialogue through materials where we Skyped each other once a week and held up a material that really didn't have any assigned use in our studios. It was just there because it was too good to throw away. And we held up these pairs of materials, and all we would share verbally was formal qualities. How much does it weigh? Is it rough? Is it smooth? Is it solid? And then we would privately, over the course of a year, allow those objects, materials to have a conversation with each other. So I transformed my, in this case, cast plaster light bulb to include properties of Ula's big bundle of used paper. And she looked at my light bulb and transformed her bundle of used paper to incorporate some aspect of my light bulb. And there were many, many, many iterations of this, which you can see on my website. I have a whole page for this project. The thing that I want to say about this is that the doing was certainly a really exciting, interesting, engaging way to move forward in one studio and to be working beyond the limits of one's own imagination. But what was really surprising about the project was when we got into the same space together with the suitcases packed and brought out the projects, the transformed objects, it was like introducing beings to each other. And those beings were being seen by each other. And it was incredibly powerful. And we went on to go to the San Francisco Center for Book Arts and enacted a workshop with people sitting around a table with materials. And we realized that their willingness to be vulnerable and to be open was so heightened when there was a relationship with something outside themselves that they were using as a vehicle for their own storytelling. And we have yet to take this on the road in what we thought was going to be kind of a personal growth corporate, workshop model, but we have based an entire exhibition, which is opening in the fall, on this this idea that we established a long time ago. And I'll tell you more about that if there's time. Another collaborative project that I've been really grateful to be a part of is the Roundtable Collaboration, a Berkeley Commonplace Program project founded by Marty McCutcheon, which is a kind of an exquisite corpse project where 5 artists each initiate a collage and then mail it to the next person. And there's a sequence, so you're always mailing your collage to the next person you're receiving from the same person. And when it circles back to the artist who originated it, they have the opportunity then to completely change it if they want, or to finesse it in some way, or destroy it even. And it's been going on for 10 years, and it's phenomenal. I don't know if Marty, I haven't seen who came in since I started, but if Marty's in the room, Marty, you can talk about this more. I was really sad not to participate this year, which was the 10th year, I believe, of the project. And it's worldwide. And Marty enacted it at the Berkeley Public Library, which I think this has so much potential, and it needs to be kind of distributed amongst all libraries or enacted. He actually created a kind of collage checkout station where artists could check out a collage, take materials home, take it home, work on it at home, or work on it in the library. And then he had an exhibition of the work that library patrons produced. And I just love this image from the historic grand lobby of the library. And so another collaborative project that's really important to me and has been going on for at least, I don't know, 5 years is SEEP, which is the Society for Education and Exchange with Potluck. And it started in the living room of my home. And I had, Dawn Sumner, the UC Davis geologist, come and talk about her trips to Antarctica, her research there. I had Christina Cogdell talk about one of the early chapters of her book on emergence theory in architecture. That was the chapter. So it's kind of become a platform for a very informal, open-ended exchange. And when it takes place in my studio, there's a maximum of 25 people. Part of the reason why I started this again in my studio, even though I felt very sort of private about opening my studio in the place where I work and live, was that my studio was so big and so just off the charts fantastic that I really felt like I needed to share it. I needed to put it to use for others as well. So I clear out the whole gallery area. This is Ula doing a sort of introduction to a workshop that we enacted, which we thought of as a conversation with and through a curated set of materials. So we started with a discussion about object lessons. Maybe you can recognize some of the objects there. And then we went into the studio, and there were very minimal rules, but in 5-15 minute, like segments, you should utilize all the materials. I'm probably saying this wrong. I can't remember what our rules were, but it was fast and it was clear. The clear guidelines were you've got to use everything, even if you don't like it. Find a way to use it and make it meaningful. And then once everyone had generated these kind of experiments with materials and placed them on the floor, those are sort of out of sequence. It was not a critique. It was a discussion about what is happening in this work. And we sort of gave everything a name, whether it was, rhythm or archiving or motion or sound, very, very distinct, simple things. And then each artist was invited to go take one of those concepts and then go make an intentional work using the same materials. And it was an all-day workshop. It was incredibly successful and inspiring. And it was amazing, like really good, accomplished artists were working and saying things like, I don't know how to do anything. I can't make anything. It was just somehow the invitation to play was paralyzing to some people. And so that was what we wanted. And it was really, really good. And then all of the SEEPs end with a potluck dinner. Where there's a very kind of focused discussion. And that's why it's small, because you can't fit that many people around the table, although it is a very big table. And so another project that I was able to work on, this was during our sheltering in place, was a project called Hello Stranger, curated by Kelly Lindner at the California State University Library Gallery. And it was really wonderful to be invited to do something when I was feeling so paralyzed. And you'll see all I could do was fix things and clean things and make masks. I'll show you some pictures of those projects. And it was a one-way thing. I made these pieces with the phrases. I'm telling you, there's like so much life in that phrase project, but I turned them into paintings. And mailed them to strangers. And there's going to be a show at some point where the strangers postcards that they wrote back to the curator about their experience of receiving the work and their thoughts about the work will be on display with one of the works. So one was set aside for the exhibition, and that show has not happened yet. And these are some of the other artists who were in the exchange. And it was a lottery. It was announced on, Instagram, and the first, each artist made 12 pieces, so 12 times whatever, I can't do math, but the first 150 people to respond received artwork. So that my current collaborative project is called Weird Cabaret Acts, which is also a phrase from the Phrase Project. I'm working with a painter, Jill Moser, and basically I'm only going to show you 2 slides, but we're giving each other visual prompts. They're not things, they're just situations. Her work is way more scholarly than mine in terms of watching and reading and learning about stuff, and my things are strictly visual. And we're making work in response. So like, what do I see in this? I might make a work just about the color yellow. I might make a work about repetition. I haven't responded to this one yet. And so here's the kind of what I did during sheltering in place, which was a form of collaboration. I raised money for the food pantry in Yolo County. By selling masks, which are basically unwearable. They're like built like army tanks, and you can't hear anyone when they're talking through them. But I didn't know that because I wasn't going anywhere and I never wore one. But so they're like freestanding sculptures. I'm hearing from other people who bought them. But that was, something that I could give myself permission to do. I could give myself permission to ferment things, to cook things, to repair things. And then I had to hit the road. I couldn't stand it any longer. In October, I drove across the country to visit my family. My father had passed away during COVID, and I had not had a chance to see him. And it was just so heartbreaking. And it's like, I'm going. And I'm so glad that I did. I just observed the world in a very, very quiet state. And I took pictures. I just pondered over life in different places. Visited the Spiral Jetty. I've been wanting to go there, ever since I knew it existed. And this is, I don't know, whenever I think about what's out there, this is what I think about. I think about this spot in Nebraska. This is a lively farm town with no people walking around, and it's just waiting. There's something just so incredibly beautiful about that image and that place. I don't know that I'll be able to do anything with it, but it's a reminder that, the world is really an interesting, beautiful place. On the road, I enacted another SEEP with Ula Warshall and her mother, Haiti Kyle, the book artist, and was lucky enough to have enough cell reception and a big picnic table to work on this ephemera catcher how-to workshop. And that was kind of the ultimate in SEEP, is not doing it in my studio, not doing it virtually, not doing it but doing it on the road. And I do want to say that SEEP for the entire year, every Saturday at 5:30, I have convened with a group of 10 people, all women, which was not an intention, but it just landed that way. And we have had 2 hours of making. The project is called SEEP Making in Place, and it's been a lifesaver. And we have learned so much and shared so much. And it's morphed into this very long-term study group. And I also taught while I was on the road, which was really hard, but I had to do it. And the last project that I've done, and before I start talking about student work, is a show that I had in Boston. At a gallery called the Shelter in Place Gallery, that was triggered and inspired my deepest interest in scale and working with ideas of, that kind of phenomenon of alternating between the gigantic and the miniature. And what's special about this gallery, and I will I'm going to spoil it for you. Spoiler alert. I recreated, because the other thing that I'm working on is a mid-career survey show, and I'm shopping it around to different university galleries. I learned of this gallery that was actually a miniature space, and I submitted and was accepted, and remade a lot of the work that I would be wanting to include in my career survey show. And just to give you an idea of how small, it's a 1/12 scale space that the artists who established the gallery lovingly created to be like 100% believable. If you want to see the shows that they have had, they are phenomenal. It's at Shelter in Place Gallery on Instagram, but that's how big the work is. So what looks monumental, and most people are putting work in the space in order to experience their work as large, however fictional that is. And I was taking very, very large work to present it at the scale that it actually is. And that just really, really, really interests me. So getting on to, so there's just 2 more short sections. One is the way I enact collaboration with my students. Sorry, I haven't paused yet to ask you guys if you have any thoughts you'd like to put in the chat. I think I'll pause for a minute and just ask, because something that's come up a lot in the talk is those moments of surprise and excitement and things that you hadn't planned on. And I'm just wondering if there are things that you have that you've organized, structured, and then enacted, and then what actually happens is very different from what you planned, and that becomes the new path forward. So if you want to just pop something in the chat, and or on any topic I've mentioned so far, it could be on finding, serendipity, chance, an enlarged sensibility through collaboration. I don't know what sheltering in place was like for you. Did you fix things? Did you repair things? Did you jump on the sourdough train? I'm just interested. If I can keep presenting while you're typing in the chat, that would be good. I can't chat and look at things, but you probably can. So I teach a class at UC Davis called Where Here Is Site-Specific Public Art. And the students use this book as a reference for how to think about place. This is the most incredible book by Lucy Lepard, who's a very, very important art historian and critic. And she really drives home the idea that she makes distinctions between the concepts of place and space. And place and space are very, very different. And in order to really experience place, you have to look at all the things that happen there, the people, the animals, the insects, the weather, just the history. Like even if your work isn't about those things, your work should be informed by those things. If it's going to, well, as the first quote said, plant that seed, that takes root in others. If you're not doing that, you're just plunking art down, and it's called plunk art. And it's not very interesting. It's kind of, it's people enjoy it. I'm not saying it's not worthwhile, but to make meaningful public work, there's so much research behind deciding what to make. And we also, I don't make them read all these whole books, but they read sections of all these books. So these are my teaching tools in the literature realm. I can happy to share a picture of that if you guys, I'm sure everyone, maybe not everyone knows about Pablo Helguera's book, Education for a Socially Engaged Art. That's an amazing book. The Art of Possibility, amazing, super readable. Okay. So I'm just gonna give you a wash of student work in this class. And then I'm gonna, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy and talk about the reserve. So students work on a variety of things, working on like doing a mock souvenir, sort of, World's Fair kind of set up to talk about the white men that the buildings at UC Davis are named after. The work is very political, honestly. When students are given a chance, oh my God, they have so much to say. This is an intervention at the Death Star, looking at the farmland and sort of looking at a very failed public space at the university that was supposed to have waterfalls and is now just this arid, I hate to swear, but hellhole in the summer months. And so they wanted to do an intervention there. This was a project that the students did in sympathy for the Merak 52. I don't know if you guys are aware of that event. They called it Free Speech Zone, and they wanted to have to build on the history of civil discourse and activism at UC Davis. 52 students were arrested after refusing to leave Merak Hall while protesting fee hikes, which were passed by the Board of Regents. These students did a landscape maintenance project. The rule was that the pieces had to be up for 2 weeks, and so the students had to maintain them and engage the public. And this piece was called String Rain, and the students had held cocoa chats. It was cold, and their idea was to just create community around this kind of whimsical, visualization of rain. And these students did a piece about pollution and recycling and climate change and collected milk bottles. I mean, this looks so simple, but for them to get permission to install a giant Y in the middle of the Poudre Creek was very, very difficult. And the collaborations took an entire quarter to realize. And this was before the center had gotten restored in the quad at UC Davis, and the students found these old tiles in the UC Davis dump and drilled holes in them and sort of created a circle because they had done their research and found the historical photos, in the library, and realized there used to be a meeting place in the center of campus. I actually think they should have used this as their model. So the piece was called Meeting Place. And then, of course, there was the horrible pepper spraying incident in 2011, and huge uprising at UC Davis, huge rallies, and resulted in the chancellor ultimately stepping down. And when this was going on, my beginning sculpture class was working inside on a wire sculpture, and I said, we have to go outside. I can't make you go, but please come with me. And this is the quad when it was had the permanent circle. And so we went out and it's like, what are we gonna do? And my TA said, let's just invite the public to make a tent, because this whole pepper spraying incident was in response to the homeless people who were, or no, they weren't homeless. They were, some of them were, but some of them weren't. They were camping on the quad to be in sympathy and allies with all the occupiers around the country. And so we did this project called Make a Tent. And it was the most successful, spontaneous, collaborative art project I have ever done. So many people came. It became a memorial. People were laying flowers. People were writing things with the wire. It was incredible. It was all over the newspaper. It was really, really successful and totally unplanned. Okay, and now I'm going to talk just quickly about a trip to the Spread Wing Farm in the Cape Bay Valley with my class. This is intermediate sculpture. I wanted to explore with them an alternative to cement and toxic polluting art materials. And so we went to the farm, dug up clay, worked with this master earth builder, and did all sorts of soil tests, and ended up with a quantity of material that we took back to the studio at Davis and made sculpture out of. And so this was a case of students actually like starting from scratch, actually harvesting their own materials for art. And that was also incredibly successful. It makes me tired just looking at these slides. And so this is a project with Steve Kaltenbach, which just happened this last January. And I'm getting to the end, not to worry. highly collaborative interventionist class concept. And as a group, they decided that they would go to SF MoMA and do an intervention. And we did have SF MoMA's approval, and none of the guards disturbed us. And they decided to adopt one of the students' ideas for an intervention drawing attention to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And they made T-shirts, and they moved around the museum at all of the exhibitions and just stood in silent reverence so that they became part of the art. It was very successful. I wish I had more pictures of the people looking at them. And they were nervous. Now, they're not used to doing confrontational art. Okay, we're going to get to the McLaughlin Reserve now, and Kathy will be talking about it. But I just, on my most recent visit to the McLaughlin Reserve, I asked Kathy if I could place some stickers. And so right when we walked in the gate, she said, yeah, how about one here? And I put one there. And this one says, it's pretty freaking amazing. And this one says, deliberateness and gravity. And it's like an Easter egg hunt. She also invited me to wander around for a couple of hours after our meeting. And I placed a lot, Kathy. I don't know if you've seen them. But I really did have that experience of, oh my God, I have to put the right one in the right place.
Well,
no one does.
I'm sure there are many that I haven't seen yet, but I've seen quite a few.
Okay. And this one says a living language. And just one other brief visit was to when Kathy sent me a text and said, Robin, oh my God, you were interested in the clay. And remember when it was there were too many reeds, you couldn't get it last time. Well, the clay is revealed. You need to come. And I came and I dug all this clay up, and I have been experimenting with it. And Kathy, it does fire. It fires dark brown. It's amazing. I'll show you some pieces of it. Anyway, I haven't used the reserve very much for my own artwork, but I have engaged my students hugely in the reserves, and I am really looking forward to placing a more large-scale phrase project in the form of signage around the reserve in areas which Kathy will talk to you about, where she is going to have volunteer stewards taking care of different zones of land. So they will be placed all over the landscape on a large scale. So what permeates all of my interactions with my students at the reserve is I guess, discomfort and not knowing, and just to be present. And we do a lot of sense perception exercises. We do stuff with our eyes closed. We touch stuff. It's a place where the imagination comes alive when you go to new places, especially in the wilderness, where everything is new and there's just so much to hear and see and feel. So to understand something is to understand its topography, to know how to chart it, and to know how to get lost. So I'm going to turn it over to the brilliant Kathy Kohler, and I'm going to be advancing the slides, of which there are maybe 20. So Kathy, just talk at your own speed, and I'm here if you want to talk with me. And don't feel like you have to talk about any of the slides specifically. You'll know when we get to the graduate work, and up until then, it's just undergraduate work and you talking to them.
Okay.
So
well,
here we go.
Hi guys, I am Kathy Kohler. I'm the director of the McLaughlin Reserve, which is a UC Davis research station, a field station. And there's field stations across the country, across the state, across the planet. And they're typically used by people who need an outdoor laboratory. So geologists use them, environmental scientists use them. So many investigations in science can't happen in a lab. They have to happen in the place where the topic of your investigation actually occurs. And so that's what these research stations are. They're field stations. But even though science is one of the main things that you can envision, Discovery Channel kind of stuff being produced, being investigated, people understanding just a little bit more about their environment. But what about people who don't do science? Don't they discover things in the environment? And so to me, that's a passion. I came from a background of art and science and had to choose which direction I went in. And there are so many people who fall into that category. I had to make the decision between art and science. And I went the science direction, and I worked my way through a life of doing a lot of stuff at field stations, and decided that at some point in time, if I had the option of applying for a job at a field station, to run a field station, that would be so cool to get to know a big chunk of land as well as I could, and facilitate our understanding of our world through facilitating the research and the investigations that go on there. And I went out and I tried to get artists involved. And you know, you can talk about these things till you're blue in the face, and people will kind of nod at you like you're talking about your last vacation to Yosemite or something. But there's nothing like getting them out here and getting them to experience it, to actually start to think about, like, how does this resonate with me? Does it resonate with me? Do I resonate with it? What is this place? Why would I want to do something here? Well, maybe I would like to do something here. And it evolves. The experience evolves. It's something that you have to step into in order to explore where you fit into it. And so Robin and I have like talked ad nauseum about all sorts of philosophical corners of humanity's reality, and how this fits into what we kind of blanketly call the land. In other words, every other organism on the planet other than us. And so when she comes out here with her class, I don't talk about the research that happens out here, or which class came out and what their topic of investigation was. No, I talk about the land. Like, these folks, some of them may have been here before. Some of them may be folks who like to be on the land, who understand the concept of being in a location where everything around them changes second by second, because it's everybody else's life except for yours. All the birds, all the insects, all the plants, they're all going about their life. And to experience that, some people seek it, but other people actually don't have a concept about it at all. They come from a place of four walls and concrete and vehicles and maybe a city park, but they don't get to sit out on a rock and think about, what is this place? If I'm not here, this place continues and life continues here. And how do I feel about that? And how do I represent that in my production of something that takes my concepts and turns it into something somebody else can experience? And that's science, right? Your concepts, your ideas, your questions, and then your investigations, and then you throw it out there as more knowledge about our world. Well, everybody from every walk of life, art, computer science, materials management, engineering, the guy who pumps out your septic system, we all will have a view when we go out into these places. And so that's what I see a place like McLaughlin Reserve as being, a place that kind of equalizes all of us. It doesn't matter where we came from, what our backgrounds are, we all have an experience here. And then we can talk to each other about these experiences. And our experiences involve all the other organisms that aren't humans. I think this is pretty equalizing for humanity.
Kathy, I'm going to interrupt really quickly to tell you that the student you're seeing peering down in the water, that visit, that trip changed her life. She ended up applying to the Arctic residency, which is on a ship, and she won. Like 12 scholars worldwide win that, and she won it. And she said it was because of McLaughlin.
That's cool. What was her background? What experience had she had?
Studio art.
The four walls. She knew the four walls. She knew drywall really, really well. That's so cool. Yeah, and I mean, here's a great example in this slide of, you know, the marks we leave on the land, right? And the various levels of marks that we leave on the land. And this was a pretty big one, right? We've made a huge machine that eats away at the land, and it looks like Tyrannosaurus Rex's foot. I mean, it's all kind of a strange disembodied consideration of like, what is our impact on the land? And so it's a place where we've we collectively have impacted the land a lot, but a place where the land also is not impacted very much. And we need to find a relationship between it. And I love the fact that these people who come out here in Robin's class, I give them a crash course in the place, the big picture of the land, but their experience is what they take back, not my crash course. My crash course tries to get them to look at the place in some way other than, ouch, this hurts when I touch it, or I'm cold. You know, it's not just the experience about their body and how prickly it is or something like that. I just try to get them to kind of think outside of it. But then those two things come together. The prickly is their experience. And how do they feel about it? And can they live with it? And here's, talk a little bit about Jody.
Okay. All right. So one of the other ways in which I engage with the reserve is by mentoring graduate students who want to do site work in a off campus for their research. And that's a whole other level because they're going to get an MFA degree based on this project. And so I introduced Jody Connolly to Kathy, and she spent the better part of her whole second year of her MFA working on this piece called an intervention in space and time. And the whole time was like, I'm crazy. I'm making something that can't be seen. It's going to grow over. It's futile. I'm trying to eradicate non-native grasses to make a pathway. You'll see what she ended up doing. She set up a night vision camera. She captured so many pictures. It was incredible, but it was something that did not have a tangible outcome for a thesis. And she did it anyway. And she ended up having a beautiful exhibition at the Verge Gallery as part of the Ali Youssef project. She was an artist in residence, and she did figure out ways to translate it. But why don't you talk about how you got Jody, like help facilitate, the safety and the walkie-talkies and the assistance. And I mean, I'll show you what she, go ahead. Go ahead.
So Jody knew she wanted to do something in nature. She wanted to hang something in a tree, or she wanted to collect some objects and assemble them. And so I don't influence people's, I don't intend to influence people's research, but in a field station like this, where you've got all sorts of people coming together in the evening around whatever food they made for themselves, or maybe they collectively cooked, who knows what your experience is, but you've got a whole bunch of people inside a building talking about what their day was like outside. And everybody's experience was different, right? And my experience is like, oh man, I was pulling, I'm engaged personally. I'm engaged in a huge repair of the environment project. And that involves basically gardening the wilds. And so I'm unloading on Jody about this. And she's like, wow, really? So she's learning these little bits and pieces of concepts of ecological management and land management and concepts of cooperative species and disruptive species and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I wonder if I could do something with this. And so hence starts what we call the line. And she's like, you're taking these non-native invasive species that have altered this ecosystem completely, and you are turning it around, and you're letting the species that evolved in the place get the upper edge after they've been marginalized and pushed out of the way intentionally for so long. I'm going to do that too. So she takes this area across the hillside and she says, I'm going to make a swath of native species in the sea of non-native species. And she starts. And she tried so hard. And ecosystem restoration, ecosystem repair is an exercise in patience. It's an exercise in generational time. It's an exercise in species lifetimes, some of them annual, some of them perennial, some of them longer than our lives. And Jody was trying to do it in one season for her MFA.
Yeah. And so this, I'm going to say the last, I'm just going to tell you, I'm advancing to the last slide. I'm giving you a real live cue. Like this is how she translated. I mean, this isn't a great installation shot, but she was able to, if you want to talk about that as a kind of way of saying how she translated that into something tangible.
Yes,
drawing.
She represented her experience. It didn't go where she thought it would go, but it was an extremely vibrant experience. And she
Yeah.
learned so much, and she figured out a way of representing it so other people could experience it, her art.
Yeah. So this is the end of our talking. Thank you, Kathy. And I just want to leave you with this one last little quote, and then I'm going to unscreen share and then invite a conversation. I think we have a good 20 minutes for that. Okay. I am going to, hold on. Hi. You guys still awake? I have to say, I started this talk a week ago thinking I have nothing to say. I don't have anything to show. I don't know. And then I had many other things going on in my life that were making me feel like I couldn't think straight. But then I got to the point where, oh my God, I have too much to say. So I hope I found a happy medium. I did eliminate things. So thank you for your patience. And thank you, Kathy. Oh my God, I wish this whole group could go out to McLaughlin together on a retreat and just, I mean, it's the most contradictory wilderness space I've ever been. We didn't even tell you it used to be a gold mine, and it's being, reclaimed. And it's this conflation of, industry and nature, and I think nature's winning, not sure. But anyway, I would like to open it up to you guys. If you guys want to turn your mics on, I don't mind if unless you have trains in the background, they could just be on. I like ambient sounds, or you have loud birds in the background. But I would just love to hear, you don't have to make comments about the talk, but just share something about you and what you do and where your excitement around these topics. I would like to learn from you.
Well, I think this was incredibly inspiring, and it just put a lot of words to the feelings and the emotions and the realities of the past year in a really amazing and an encapsulated way. And I just love this idea of, the four walls versus the landscape, and then the interior creative mind versus the public creative interactions. I just think there's so many parallels to what we've been through and what we're going to be producing, that it's really inspiring. So thank you for creating this forum and opening up this discussion. I don't know if that's inspiring. If the same things are inspiring to anybody else, but I'm super jazzed, and I feel like I have new words and more motivation to go forward with the ideas that are percolating in my interior creative space, and I'm really looking forward to getting them out. So
I'm gonna just jump in because I might have to get off soon. So I'm so glad I got to listen and watch this. It was incredibly inspiring. I would echo some of the things that Adele said. And where is Kathy? Okay, I did specifically want to say to Kathy what you're doing and sort of this connection. And I don't think, Robin, that I even understood that you did this with some of your students or all of your undergrads and some of the grad students who go to the reserve. But it sort of plays something for me, and I'm kind of addressing this to anyone, but Kathy, and particularly something you said sort of in the beginning when you started to speak about just sort of the amazing world of, sort of that we're living in, and all of the sort of science that is going on, all the research, all the changes. I have been fascinated by this just completely on my own through probably coming at it from various numbers of interests, but just started just obsessively reading about plant neurophysicists or neurobiologists, reading about plants, reading books by entomologists. A lot of it is talking about regeneration and landscaping. I live in a very urban area of Los Angeles, so I'm sort of connecting to places here that are also engaged in this. I just read Douglas Tallamy's books, who you might be familiar with him, but for me, this is it's so informal, and I just do it because I follow these threads of things that I get interested in and that I feel very passionately about. And so it's interesting to see the way in which maybe graduate students or people are kind of trying to weave something in, like a space that actually the university kind of holds, like in this field station place. I found that, I guess one of the things I think about a lot is public engagement in all these ways. And I mentioned in the chat that I've been volunteering at a place that's considered, it's inside of the LA Arboretum, which is a county-run facility, which is actually a pretty wonderful place to spend some time. Inside of it is this thing called the Crescent Farm, which is kind of a demonstration garden to show people. It's very different from the rest of the Arboretum because they use no pesticides, they have an organic garden, they have fruit trees, they have water harvesting techniques, and it's almost about an acre. But through COVID, I've been going there and, you know, watching the land, caring for the land, weeding, doing whatever's needing, but learning a lot about, you know, it's a kind of practical thing that feeds my other interests. So, but I continually am thinking of this idea, how to engage people more in this. Because I think of it as being, we're sort of in a crisis, and how to do this and what can my role be. So I appreciate seeing some of the examples of that you gave, and I hope that wasn't too, I was trying to rush through.
We have about 10 more minutes. It would just be great if, thank you so much, Sarah Jo, for your enthusiasm for the work where Kathy's doing. It's awesome. But would someone else like to just share something that they're doing in the name of engagement that might not be, you know, obvious, you know, I don't know, or it can be obvious. I don't care. Yeah, Elizabeth.
I have a little question for Kathy. You know, you mentioned that you had to choose between art and science. You opted for science, but now you're deeply engaged with people in the humanities and the arts. And I wondered if this ever led you to think of you, as you bring artists into a science universe through your knowledge, do you ever feel lured into the creative zone by the artists and humanities scholars who come to the reserve?
Well, yes, I'm out there with my hands down collecting the clay with the artists, and I think one of the reasons why I push to make the place visible to folks of the non-science background is because I do have that in me, that urge, right? I don't have a lot of time right now to personally express it, but it'll come out. It'll be some sort of material science, probably textiles, combination of using clay and wood and rejected grasses that I, you know, the stuff that I gather out of the field that I call a weed. Well, maybe it can actually be used for something interesting. So yeah, I think about that a lot. I don't have a lot of time to do it, but I think about it a lot. But Robin and I have talked about collaborations, right? That's sitting around the table in the field station of people from different backgrounds. That's exactly what we want to see, is two people from completely different backgrounds saying, wow, we both had that observation about that shrub where the hummingbird was going. Why don't we? And you know, the conversation goes and they approach it from their own direction.
Or like the guy when I came out there 2 weeks ago, the guy, I can't remember his name, that really famous scientist guy.
Yeah, David, yes. The guy
he's a caterpillar expert, and he was collecting and photographing the tiniest little, they're called fairy moths. And I was looking in the microscope and I was like, oh my God, like they have iridescent metallic wings, and we were like, and I said, well, you're not going to understand what I'm doing. Here's a sticker. You want a sticker? It's like, and he's like, oh my God, I love this. It was like, there was no hierarchy in that moment. Like you have your scholarship, I have mine, and it's exciting. It's there. And what could one do with that? It's like, that is interesting to me. And we've already communicated.
That's why I feel like the environment is the great equalizer.
Yeah.
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 Anybody else want to share something, or a question, or just an experience, something that they're doing that maybe doesn't even have a name, like Ula, collecting trash.
Thank you, Robin. It was a really great talk, and thank you, Kathy. It was really great to meet you virtually. I've heard so much about you over the years. Yeah, I love the role of as a citizen. I think that really was what happened this year in COVID, was an opportunity to slow down and just wear the same clothes and not buy anything, and not make anything. And one of the biggest things that gives me pleasure right now, is gardening, and it's basically weeding. And just actually seeing weeds as imitators, as visitors, as, invasive species. There's just so much to learn, and it's been in my 50s that I've actually become a gardener. It didn't really come naturally to me. So I think that land-based work that the students are doing is I'm not surprised that it's changed some of their lives. So I really enjoy that. I also do love to pick up litter, and it gets me into roads that, I took a workshop a few years ago with a man who makes these duradangos that are these dirt balls, spheres. He makes them out of heavily impacted soil, and they're based on a Japanese art that kindergarten children do. And it was a short workshop. He didn't take us through the whole process because it takes like 3 days, but he led us through the sifting of the soil, the making it into mud, the forming it into a ball in your hand. And then there's this process over 3 days where you kind of dry and wet it and dry and wet it and continue to polish it. And after 10 minutes of him just making a sphere of this, a crack had appeared because his hands were pulling out the moisture too quick. And he said, oh, and now I care about this. And that was like, and now I care about this. Like, it just takes 10 minutes to really care. So whether you're gardening or you're picking up litter or whatever, you start to be in the land. So, especially in industrially ravaged land, it's like, what's the moment at which you start to care? And it really can be so, short, So thank you. Thank you so much.
We still have, do we have time, Trina?
We go for another few minutes. I do have a question from the chat that I can also share, but just in case anyone else had anything.
Yeah, and we have a few more minutes. Anyone else like to share something? I feel like I'm not going to call people. That would be rude, except people I know really well.
Well, I'll share because Erica had to leave, but she did ask a question in the chat. She's curious about your collecting over time of the rocks and bricks, so like the found objects. And what do you think of when you look at, organize, and talk to those collections of things collected over time? That was her question.
What do I think about when I look at them? I think of them as studies. They're studies of form. I'm interested in the really conceptual kind of thinking that goes into calling that a sculpture when I didn't make it. I'm really interested in like that idea of kind of claiming and reframing and representing. There's also this kind of weird sort of thing that happens when I'm collecting, which is that I'm saving something from obscurity, and maybe I'm taking it, maybe what I'm really doing is taking it out of a cycle that it should be left there to tumble, to continue tumbling. I'm not sure. So there's something very kind of, I feel a bit greedy when I make these collections, and I have to sort of, and I come to terms with my greed by sharing and making these things extremely public. They're currently sitting on the porch of my house in Cape Breton that I can't visit. So anyone who wanders up there can see them. And it is, and I made a huge effort when I had my show in New York to get them back across the Canadian border. And they're like, you know, I thought I wasn't going to be able to get them out of Canada. And they're like, well, do they have any carvings on them? Are they like, is there any human imprint on them? Because that would be completely forbidden. And I was like, no. And they're like solid sandstone through and through. And it's like, they believed me, but coming back, they wanted proof. And I had a catalog, and it was like, no, I just showed them, and now they're returning to where they came from. And so that felt really good. So I really have a lot of thoughts about the concept of vibrant matter and the ways in which inanimate objects and materials actually have resonance and communication. And maybe you can call it anthropomorphism, you can call it whatever you want, but I do believe those rocks have feelings. And those rocks did not want to be left in New York. And so I think about them in a very human and slightly off-kilter spiritual way. That's just my own reckoning with, you know, balancing the collector avaricious greediness in me, and then that caring that Ula is talking about, like the loving of these objects. So I don't know is the answer, but I also am really, I'm very, very plagued as an artist who's been at it for a long time with adding more material to the world. And how do one of the ways I reconcile that is to not do it, or to reclaim and make visible things that already exist.
Yeah.
Not in a nostalgic way, giving, like, they're very autonomous things that I don't like interpret with my own like story. They just are. So that helps me continue being an artist, honestly.
You know, what you do, Robin, is very interesting, because we all do that, right? We're on vacation, we pick up some pretty rocks, we throw them in the back of our trunk, and we remember the places and how wonderful those rocks looked. And then we unload them in our driveway, and they're just so out of place. They just don't represent at all the reason why we took them in the first place. And you're giving all of these objects another chance at a future by turning them into those pieces of art. It's really cool. They're not just totally out of place things anymore. I like it.
Yeah, that's interesting, Kat. It's almost like
we
the
could have
phenomenon of photographs, where you take a photograph of
And it never represents the
and
feeling
you get home and you think, what was that? You know?
Exactly. Why did I do
It just seems really depressing when your experience of a place was so rich.
Yeah,
That experience with bread. Bread in France never tastes good when you
bring it home.
the sensory thing.
yeah. So all of us have to get out there. I think that's one thing that COVID taught us, is it just doesn't taste as good. All of our experience, whether it's binge watching The Walking Dead or whatever, it doesn't taste so good when all we can do is stay in our little space. We have to get out there and experience it. Even if we can't take it back home with us, we need to experience it out there where it is. And I think
I guess that's the thing about that little waving awning in Nebraska. That it's like a wave. It's like, don't forget, I'm here.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many times I look at that image and I just go, oh my God. I don't even know what I'm thinking. it's a calling me kind of gesture.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
reminds me of the way that you stare into a fire. You're like
Ah.
drawn into it, but you also need to stay back from it because it has its own space. It's very interesting.
Kathy, I was wondering when you said you wanted to run a field station so that you could get to know a place intimately. And that kind of linked in with one of Robin's quotes about being able to chart, that to know something is to be able to chart it or to
Mhm.
understand it like that. And so do you feel that's a process that you're going through in relation to the reserve?
Well, I've worked out in big places where my work took me to every inch of a defined area. And the experience of just knowing a large piece of land. I mean, it's lovely to know a downtown of of a city that's, 3 blocks over is this really cool cafe. But then if you go around the corner, there's this eclectic guy who just sets up his, all these things. You can do the same thing for this piece of land. You know that if you step around that rock and go down below where you see that old log, if you look under that, I mean, you have these relationships with something that is so big, so much bigger than you. And so I've had that my entire adult life in all these places that I've had the privilege of spending so much time and being able to walk across the land with a mission. It might have been looking for the certain bat species I was studying or looking for the bird conservation project I was on for an endangered bird. It has, I have my own little agenda, but other than that agenda, it's all the experience around me. And being able to be the person who is in charge of that place and now start to have all these students coming in and having their own experiences and then telling me their experiences. And all of a sudden my experience gets bigger through their experience. That's been rewarding. That's been super.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you
Thank you.
both.
Yeah.
And for everyone for sticking around and contributing to some of the discussion. And I just wanted to say, I put it in the chat, but I wanted to say it out loud as well again, that we did record it and we'll be sharing a link of the recording along with, maybe some of the other resources that were mentioned in the webinar today in an email to all folks who registered for the event today. So look for that coming in the next week or so. We hope that it sounds like folks enjoyed it. So we hope that you enjoyed the webinar today. We hope that this is an opportunity to learn and to discuss and hopefully maybe even spark some new ideas. I heard potentially, I think from Adele, who was talking earlier too. And yeah, we're just so happy to see you all and we hope that you have a great rest of your day. I don't know, Robin or Kathy, if you have any final parting words.
I just like to say, if anyone wants to have more conversation about anything that we've been talking about, I love to talk to you. And just thank you so much for listening, and Kathy for your contributions and just everyone's interactions. It's really good conversation and I really appreciate the TLCs. Thank you so much, Trina and Papiro and Aaron. Cameras are off, but thank you.
Thanks everybody for making this happen and sharing your time.
Thank you.
And thanks, Robin.
Kathy.
Super amazing talk and so great to see all those projects. And makes all the wheels turn.